G'day cocktail lovers, I hope you've been keeping well. I hope you're ready for another cocktail. And this cocktail I've decided to make is to mark a milestone. You may not realize it, but as this cocktail video goes to air, we're approaching October 27th, which is actually the 300th day of 2020. I think it's the 300th day. It might be the 3000th day, or it might still be April. I am having a lot of trouble just being on board with the passage of time this year. It's very confusing to me. I've been working from home for 6 months and I find that actually very difficult to process. But here we are, the 300th day of the year. And that's a big round number. I should be able to come up with some themed cocktail to suit that. And of course, the first thing that popped into my head was the movie and comic book 300, inspired by the story of the 300 Spartans stopping the army of Persians at the gates of Thermopylae. And so I did a bit of searching. Is there a cocktail on that theme about Sparta or Spartan? And there are a lot of cocktails in various sites that people have called a Sparta or Spartan cocktail. None of them seemed very good, quite honestly. And there's not like an established, recognized in cocktail circles cocktail that's called Sparta or Spartan. It's just people have made a cocktail and said, I'm calling this a Spartan cocktail. And there's a bunch of them. They weren't particularly related to each other. None of them particularly grabbed my fancy. But then I found one that sounded quite interesting to me. It's called 300 Poems. And I think that really is fitting for the 300th day of the year, 300 Poems. And this one is a brandy cocktail. You use whatever brandy you like, a cognac, an armagnac, a brandy, whatever suits your fancy. I'm going to use a local brandy for this one. And it also has jam in it. And you might recognize, that sounds like, anytime you jam in a cocktail, is this like a breakfast martini? And this does seem to be one of many dozens of riffs on a breakfast martini, since that was invented in the 90s. Isn't a martini, by the way. It was just invented in the 90s, and the original creator served it in a martini glass, and people just automatically called it a martini because of the glass. You will literally find dozens of variations online of cocktails that have some sort of jam or marmalade in them, and they're all obviously inspired by the breakfast martini from back in the 90s. This is one in that cavalcade, and without further ado, I'm going to get into the 300 Poems. Brandy is the sole alcohol content in this cocktail. There's 2 ounces going in. The one I'm using is an Australian brandy from the 23rd Street Distillery. They call it Not Your Nana's Brandy. And I will freely admit I bought it for the name. But it is also quite a good brandy. I've compared it side by side. I have like a French cognac, VSOP, an armagnac, and a VSOP French brandy. And it holds its own. It's got its own flavor profile, but I've tasted it next to some, very upmarket VSOP cognacs and brandies, and for my money, it holds its own. So I'm doing 2 ounces of Not Your Nana's Brandy. We're also going to add 1 ounce of lemon juice. I'm going to squeeze some fresh for just that extra zesty feel. Depending on the size of your lemons, it might be half a lemon or a whole lemon, but you want to get 1 ounce of lemon juice into the cocktail. We also want some sugar syrup in there, just half an ounce or 15 mils. This is one I've made at home, very straightforward, 50% sugar, 50% water. Mix it either by warming it up on the stove, or if you're very patient, just by stirring the sugar into cold water. Nothing too fussy, and you can experiment with the types of sugars you use as well. This is a straightforward made with caster sugar, 50-50 sugar syrup. So we'll do 15 mils, half an ounce of sugar syrup. The final step is the jam. This cocktail recommends blackberry jam, 2 spoons of it, which is a slightly ambiguous measure. So I'm using what's essentially 2 bar spoons of the jam. This is a homemade jam, which is very tasty, but yeah, store-bought obviously is fine. So we're going to put in 2 spoons of blackberry jam. Then we add ice to our shaker. Going to give it a good hard shake, really get that jam blended in. Shake for about 10 or 15 seconds. The final touch is to strain it into a chilled glass. I'm using a Nora glass. Now, of course, given the jam content in there, we definitely want to fine strain this one. So I'll be using the Hawthorne strainer on the shaker and using a fine strainer to get it into our glass. We end up with an absolutely fantastic color from the blackberry jam in this case. And now the taste test for our 300 poems. Oh, that's really good. And I'll be honest, I'm tasting mostly the lemon juice balancing the jam. It's a really nice drink. Yeah, you probably definitely need the full ounce of lemon juice in there because we've got some sugar syrup. How many cocktails have I made before making this one? Sugar syrup and the jam in there. And the jam, it definitely gives it a different element to just sugar syrup. We've definitely brought in the fruitiness. The brandy is really playing a supporting role in this, which I find surprising because 2 ounces of brandy, I thought you'd really notice the brandy in this one. This is one of those very dangerous ones. And I think this is how people convince themselves they could call it a breakfast martini as well. I'll put jam in it and it tastes like I'm just drinking jam. But yeah, if you've got 2 shots of booze in there, it's quite the start to your day if you're having one of these first up. And I can't, in good conscience, recommend this sort of thing first thing in the morning. But I'm glad I made it to mark the 300th day of the year. The 300 poems, a jam and brandy cocktail. Might not have been the first thing that occurred to you when you thought of a brandy cocktail, but I definitely recommend it. I quite like this, and I'd be interested to hear if you've got a favorite variant on the breakfast martini, or maybe you like the original breakfast martini recipe. There's certainly a lot of variation. I've seen them with basically every spirit, from whiskies to tequila to rums to gins to vodkas to brandy. Basically, there's a whole palette out there that you can blend, and it's all about having a bit of fun and enjoying what you drink. I'm enjoying this one. I hope you enjoyed it too. Hope to see you again soon. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, it'd be great if you did subscribe. Hit the little notification bell so you know when I'm uploading a video. Let me know what you think of brandy and jam, or what you think I should do in the future. Always good to hear from you. In the meantime, you take care of yourself. I'm going to finish this off. Cheers.